All right, welcome back, everybody. I see that the number of folks in the room is jumping up. Hopefully, you've all enjoyed the event so far. Sarah was incredible this morning, and Connie is so great. I saw that she was in the lounge area with a full table for most of the last hour. So I'm not sure if she's still in there. Hopefully, she's able to take a break now. But now we have our next wonderful speaker, McKenzie Day, is here. Also, McKenzie is from also does volunteer work with TPLD. And McKenzie is a senior technical instructional designer that creates digital learning experiences with purpose. Sarah's career has led her to diverse communities of learners all over the planet, from Antigua to Quito to Hong Kong and back to the U.S. Please welcome McKenzie to our Road and L&D event. She discusses preparing for a smooth transition while still in the classroom. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Luis, for that nice intro. So I'm here today to talk about some of the advantages you have if you're job hunting while you're still in the classroom. So I know a lot of teachers who were trying to transition over the summertime, myself included, and kind of kicking themselves like, why didn't I download those grade books before I left or take advantage of these resources? So I'd like to point out today some of the things that you can start doing now while you're still in the classroom. That'll set you up for success when you do transition because you have a lot of resources available to you. And I've got my little dog on the screen here, and he's actually right behind me. I don't know, probably can't see him, but if he's woofing too loud, let me know and I'll move him out of this room. But we probably both have attachment issues after a couple years in the pandemic together. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Quick look at what I'm going to talk about today. So just a little bit about my background. Point number 2 is actually the thing I think that's the most difficult and most uncomfortable about the process of transitioning as a teacher, and that is shifting your mindset. I'd like to provide some practical steps that you can take today, tomorrow, this week, and so that's number 3. Point number 4, I'm just going to provide some personal advice, although I should say with this entire presentation, it's very personal, so some of the things I say might not apply to you. Take everything with a grain of salt. You know yourself and your journey better than I do. And then finally, I want to honor your time, and so we have time for a Q&A at the end. All right. I should also say I've built in some discussion questions, so I'd love to see some, time that we're going to take together in the chat. I'd love to see some conversation happening there. So I'll let you know when we reach those checkpoints because I do want to hear from you about how the transition's going. All right, so a little bit about my background. I taught middle school and high school social studies for 10 years, and I worked overseas, so I was teaching in IB schools abroad. And my last school, I was a head of department. So there I started to get leadership and management experience. And that's where I launched my transition into instructional design. So for the past couple years, I've been in instructional design in finance and then technology. I did recently get a promotion from instructional designer to senior instructional designer. So that's been my journey to L&D. And this is an overview of how long it took me. Everyone's journey looks different, but I think the thing I want to highlight here is the spring of 2021 was just like one giant epic fail for me. I knew in January that I was going to just start applying for jobs, January of 21, and I was just using my teacher portfolio. So at the time, I wasn't putting a lot of effort into converting materials. And so that entire spring from January all the way to the end of the school year, I think I got 1 or 2 callbacks from some ed tech companies, but it just wasn't working. So that summer, I basically put myself through like a job hunting crash course. And if you can see there in June, I took an entire month to revamp everything, my portfolio, my application materials. In July, I started applying to 10 jobs per day. And then in August is when the interviews started rolling in. And I will say the context was very different summer of 21 compared to now. So I understand that this is not going to look the same probably for people who are applying for jobs now. But that was my journey. Took a couple years to get where I'm at. And, it's not one size fits all. All right. So, talking about the mindset shift, I think this is something that's maybe the most uncomfortable for teachers. Um, it's not just hard work transitioning, it's also heart work. I got that from a DE&I coordinator at the last school I taught at. Her name's Jacinta Williams. She runs the Culture Ed Collective. She's incredible. But it's really the most difficult part of the process, I think, because for teachers, work is such a big part of our identity that it's really hard to let that go, to sever those ties. Even just changing your resume, you might be deleting bullet points that you're really proud of. And so shifting that mindset of leaning into your new career and trying to let go of some of the old is quite difficult. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these tips I have. First of all is boundaries. You can start saying no to things. If you're in the classroom, it's very likely that you're asked to take on a lot of extra responsibilities, extra duty, extracurriculars, but you need to really honor your time and make time for yourself in your transition. So that can be really hard to build up these boundaries. But once you decide that you're transitioning, you're going to need all the time you can get. So you have to kind of start shifting away from just being the yes person and saying yes to everything admin asks of you. Now, privacy, this is just kind of some practical stuff. You don't have to announce that you're leaving or even that you're looking for a new job until contractually obligated. I think I probably shot myself in the foot because I told my school I was leaving in October, that I would be leaving the following summer. Like I knew this was my last year in the classroom. And looking back, that probably wasn't the best choice because then, you're overlooked for opportunities. They might not want to invest in you, send you on PD. So really, you don't look at your contract and see when you're obligated to tell them you're leaving. And also, you don't owe them a reason. You don't have to explain yourself wanting to leave. That is your reason. I think a lot of administrators, maybe you have like a really good relationship with them, but at the end of the day, they're your employer and not your friend, so you don't have to tell them everything. And the last tip here with privacy is don't use work devices for this transition. It might be really tempting at lunchtime to start working in Storyline or building up a portfolio, but keep it separate. This is just so you don't come across any problems in the workplace. All right, thinking about benefits, this is a big one. Take a look at, if you know that you're transitioning this spring, this is going to be it for you, or whatever your timeline is, look at what benefits you have remaining to you. Are there any personal days? Are there any sick days you have left? If it's really drastic in some extreme cases, you might want to see if you have short-term disability or FMLA that's available to you if it's like you need to get out. I've talked to teachers who have to leave in a hurry for various reasons with a toxic workplace. So just look at what benefits you have and you are entitled to them. So if you have personal days that you have to take for interviews, if you have sick days that you need to use for mental health, do what you got to do. And that goes along with this mindset shift. You don't have to give everything to your organization if you know you're leaving and they haven't done the same for you. Lastly, talking about relationships, think about who you trust that you want to confide in that you're leaving. You don't need to tell everyone at your school, but also think about who could be your references. I found corporate job applications run quite differently. You don't really provide references until the very end. So you don't need to ask people in advance, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your principal or head of school. It could be like a program manager, coordinator, someone who maybe is in charge of curriculum that you used. So you can get creative there, thinking about who you trust and who you want to be your reference and who you can lean on in that transition. Also relationships with buddies at school, you can think about maybe someone could serve as a SME for a project that you're working on for your portfolio. So for example, maybe you have a teacher friend who's a gardener, or like I said, if you have a good relationship with the DE&I coordinator, you could ask them to be a SME for some work samples or professional development that you're coming up with. All right, I see some questions in the chat. I'm gonna pause a second, take a look at that. So did I choose finance and tech because of special knowledge? Not really. I am not the expert. in finance or tech. I do have an interest in personal finance, but not enough to be like a financial advisor. The first time around when I was applying for my first ID job, I applied to all industries. I mean, well, there's certain industries where I wouldn't work, maybe like ethically, it's okay to draw those lines, but generally I was like, I don't really mind medical, like healthcare, tech, finance. Yeah, so no, I just took whatever interviews I could get. And then tech I did want to get into. So that was something that I targeted. I really worked on my programming skills for the last year. And yeah, that was, so once I was in the field of instructional design, then I started narrowing it down. All right, as far as the resume and making it less teachery, it's all about the lingo. And I'm going to talk about that, the types of experiences that you are already doing in the classroom. That's coming up very soon, and how you can translate those for for your resume. Okay, and someone says something about the timeline slide. At the very end, I'll pull up and drop my slideshow in the chat. Okay. All right. So this is the first question I have for you all. Thinking about that mindset shift and maybe drawing some boundaries with your school so that you can be successful in your job transition. How is your relationship with your school going to change when you decide to leave? So for me, I knew I was leaving like in October of this, and I stayed the rest of the school year. But just something to think about. So you can reflect on this individually, maybe reflect on it with a therapist. In my case, maybe if you have some contributions you want to share in the chat, that'd be nice, but you don't have to. Yeah, being less emotionally invested. Yeah, and you're emotionally invested like in the students as well, and in the identity, like the whole thing. It's teaching for me was my whole life. So it is hard to draw a line there emotionally. Yeah. Getting the job done and getting home, that's also really hard. Not taking work home. For me, I had like stacks of grading. I was a history teacher, so lots of essays. Yeah, preserving your time, PTO, yep. Yeah, we're not always going to have administration support. I've heard stories of people who do have the full support of admin. Other times, those relationships kind of fall apart when you announce that you're leaving. Yeah. All right, so if that first step is really shifting your mindset, let's talk about a couple things you can do today to make that job transition really successful. So I want to get practical, and I'm going to include an example from my own transition for each of these tips so you can see what I mean. All right, number one is leveraging those teacher accomplishments. So you still have access to all of your documentation. That is huge. So start gathering your data, any measurement results that you have, and figure out how to frame it to show how you've improved performance. And so with that step, you're gathering all this information because you're going to use it for your resume bullet points. All right. And then once you have that information, yes, you need to do a bit of research, maybe by looking at job postings. How is the corporate world wording these? And then you're going to translate them. So, save survey results. If you have surveys from students, maybe from workshops that you ran for other teachers, save your grade books, and then practice framing all of that in corporate language. And you have to start scrubbing K through 12 terms and references from your sort of digital footprint. So for example, if you're talking about that you chaperoned field trips or you're an expert in social emotional learning, those things are not going to translate as much. So you have to really do your research and figure out what's the language that the corporate L&D world is using. And then you can see here, this is an example from my time in my last role. I developed a new history course with exam results 16% above the global average. So that was something that was actually really difficult for me to find those numbers because, like I said, I did not download my grade books before I left. So I had to do like a bit of digging into the IB grades globally over the summer to just even figure out those numbers. All right, moving on to step 2. Building experience. Okay, so you want to build experience while you're in the classroom for the job that you want. So, whatever job it is that you want to go into, it could be customer success, it could be instructional design, it could be e-learning development, no matter what it is, maybe it's sales. Think about what sorts of experiences you need that are going to look like you're already doing that job. So for me with instructional design, I thought about how can I develop other teachers' skills? Because I wanted to show that I improved adults' learning and performance in the workplace. And so, yeah, if you're, let me see, I think I see someone talking about the elementary level. Yeah, so if you're elementary level, maybe you don't have numbers from your students, but you could think about how can you develop your colleague skills? Maybe you start like a lunchtime group where you all are early adopters and testing out ed tech and implementing new technology. You want to create opportunities providing faculty PD. So if there's any professional development days, volunteer, like lead a workshop. Think about I think someone just said talking about parents. Yes, I did a parent session when I was a community service program manager for one of the schools I taught at. And that gave me lots of good feedback. And I had a quick survey at the end of it that showed that the session was effective. So that was good. You can lead workshops, present at school events, maybe volunteer to run some meetings. Anything that you're doing teaching other teachers, we would call that train the trainer in instructional design. So you have to create these opportunities for yourself, though. So your principal is not going to come to you and ask you to lead professional development unless, you have to put your name forward. So really think about what opportunities do you have. Maybe you could take on some student teachers. I had interns that I mentored every year, and that's something I was able to talk about in interviews. All of this experience you're building, the point of it is for interviews. You'll have stories and anecdotes that you can talk about. And the key here is, once again, remember to include impact. So at the end of each of these opportunities, give out some sort of survey or have something you're measuring. Did like 95% of people who attended adopted some of your strategies or something like that? Some other examples I have on here are contract. If you can start doing like part-time contract work, that's great. You could also volunteer. So one of my big projects, one of my friends is a public defender, and I created some e-learning for a public defender's office, and that was able to go in my portfolio. They're using it. I've had really good feedback from it, but that was something I did volunteering my time. That still is professional experience. And then the example I have on here, this workshop called Navigating Difficult Conversations. This is an example. I was a social studies teacher, and we all know social studies is very politically fraught right now. And we were getting a lot of complaints from students and parents that teachers were not equipped to navigate these really difficult conversations, and teachers were uncomfortable with conflict. So I created a half-day workshop. I consulted with a DE&I expert, and I led this workshop. It had follow-up touch points throughout the year, and we went from, it was like multiple complaints a month to I think 2 or 3 the entire following school year. And so that was something, that workshop that I was able to talk about. And that was for other teachers, for adults in the workplace. So that's the type of experience you want to see if you can find like moments of opportunity to engage in. Volunteer. Okay, I see a question. Where do we find volunteer opportunities? Ask your friends. Where do your friends work? Do you have any friends who work for like nonprofits or just have like hobbies? You have a friend who's an expert in something. Maybe you have a friend who's opening a small business and you can support them. And I see people are sharing other ideas in the chat, so thank you all. Yeah, volunteer opportunities. You want to lean on your social network. Cool. Staff training. Yeah, if you've done any staff training, you can definitely well, if it's already done, you can like ask around, ask for feedback possibly, but maybe you can show, instead of um, just results like level 1 results where people enjoy it, do they think that they grew. Try to dig a little deeper and talk to admin maybe and see, like, did you save hours, did you minimize labor for teachers, did you shorten a process. Think like bigger picture. How did your session impact the organization? Maybe you changed processes, like process change, improvement. Those are all things you could talk about in your bullet points. All right, so after you're done building experience, then the other thing you want to be doing while you're still in the classroom that you have a really good advantage with is upskilling. So you want to upskill efficiently. You want a good use of your time. I know teachers are busy, and so you want to seek out relevant professional development. Think about, maybe, do you have a PD budget that you could use that your school could help out with? I had one school sent me to South by Southwest EDU, and I got to attend a whole like design thinking day of workshops, which was awesome and totally relevant. My other example here, in my last year in the classroom, became a Google certified educator. So that was really good, like tech training. It also showed me a great example of like digital learning for adults. I think the Google certification programs are really well done. And so that was awesome. The other thing, if you're upskilling and you're still in the classroom, you probably are eligible for teacher discounts. So I know Articulate, I think Camtasia as well, have those discounts. So if you're feeling like 30 days is just not enough, maybe think about that. Or also look, maybe your school already has subscriptions to different software. Maybe not like the exact software that you want for instructional design, but something adjacent. So I was able to build up a lot of video tutorials and demos because we had Screencastify. It's not Camtasia, but it's close. I upskilled. I was one of those like tech savvy teachers that was always trying to incorporate new ed tech. So like using Nearpod or Pear Deck, I was able to make those connections with Articulate Storyline and talk about that in interviews. But there's a lot of overlap, even if it's different tools. You can talk about case studies that might be similar, how you used the ed tech. Test out some of these authoring tools in your classes. You probably have an LMS, so you could even record some examples of how you build courses there, how you use the LMS. Any software that you have access to as a teacher, see if it's relevant. Can you build work samples in it? Can you upskill? Can you get your school to pay for you to upskill? That's best case scenario. If not, look for those teacher discounts. Okay, let's see. I'm going to do one group question and then I'll take a look at the Q&A here. All right, so given some of these topics that I just talked about, leveraging your teacher accomplishments to really harness that data for your resume, building experiences that, help, experiences helping adults in the workplace, experiences that relate to the job that you want, and then efficiently upskilling, thinking of the resources you have available. What's a concrete step that you could possibly take maybe this week? Think about something you could do that you have at your disposal in the classroom that's going to help your transition to L&D. And then I see your questions there. I'll get to those in a second. Yeah, if you have access to Canvas training, you could create some little video tutorials, maybe for some less tech savvy teachers or just for your own YouTube channel. Record some samples of classes that you've built. Oh yeah, if your district has Adobe Creative Cloud, hop into Illustrator and start practicing building up little job aids, infographics, visuals, prototypes in Adobe XD. That's a great resource if you have it. Yep. Practice building asynchronous learning activities. Yeah, these are good. So I saw a question, does Google Classroom count as an LMS? I don't think it's technically an LMS, but it's like a digital classroom platform. I forget why, but I think I've looked into that because I was definitely like a Google Classroom person. Um, I mean, you could talk about it like in the same world as an LMS, but it just doesn't have all the capacity that like an official LMS would. All right. Kayleen, thanks for providing some examples of the LMSs. We got Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas. Yep. Karen, I think that is one. I've not used it, but I've heard of it. Yeah, someone mentioned a concrete step that you can take for your transition is possibly creating a resource for parents, showing them how to navigate schools' online resources. Definitely. And I'm thinking, depending on your district, maybe even like multilingual, having different options there. So really like speaking to your audience. All right, then let's see. I've got this question. Have you used any free or low cost ID technology, free or low cost ID technology or platforms? Yeah, Screencastify is great as far as creating video demos, video tutorials. You can have like a talking head or just voiceover screencasts. With that, you can build like software tutorials as you walk through how to do different like technical skills. That's great. I mean, honestly, PowerPoint, I can build the same infographics in PowerPoint as I do in Adobe Illustrator. I also, if you have a Mac, I love Pages and Keynote. I know a lot of people don't love them, but if you're building visuals, that's great. I'm curious, any free or low cost tech recommendations from the audience? Yeah, Canva. That's just one. None of the organizations I've worked for have used Canva, so I haven't really gotten in there. I look at Canva and then I recreate the things I see in Adobe Illustrator. Yep. And I know Canvas does have a free option where you can go in and build like trial templates or trial courses for free. So you can get in there if you don't have LMS experience and kind of tinker around. All right. Going to move on to my last topic, some personal advice. So this part, it is very personal. This is the part especially where I'm asking you to please keep that in mind, that everyone's situation is different. These were two things that really mattered to me when I was transitioning, when I was still in the classroom, things that caused me either a lot of stress or things that I desperately needed. So the first one was thinking about finances. If you were able, you want to batten down the hatches, cut discretionary spending as much as possible and start building up an emergency fund. My context was that I am not married. I didn't have like a backup plan or backup job. When the school year ended in early June, or I think end of May, early June, I had nothing else lined up. So I knew that I needed to have some sort of income holdover in place. I had spent like years paying off my student loans and reached a point where I was finally able to start saving up an emergency fund. So I know that's not the case for everyone, but that was really important to me, and it made it a little bit less scary knowing I had at least something to fall back on. And also think about insurance, like really plan for that. I think I had 1 month, I had a gap where I did not have health insurance, which is like yikes, because I am just a walking bag of whoops. I'm someone that really needs health insurance, because if you're ever kayaking down a remote river and you see like a random boulder on the side of the river, I'm the first person to be like, I want to jump off that and break my eardrum and lose both my contact lenses in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, that thinking about insurance, maybe look ahead at COBRA or Affordable Care Act, like my brain it spirals. Like I need to have a plan B and plan C. So I wrote out a whole plan. And so that was really important to me. And also with my transition, I really relied on free resources, or at least low cost. So for me, like a boot camp or an academy, it was not an option. I knew I was going to just get scrappy and figure it out. I took advantage of every free YouTube tutorial. I think the only things I paid for, I did pay for LinkedIn Learning, so I could take courses on some of the technology. And then I also paid for like one storyline course on Udemy, but it was less than $100. Yeah, teachers are scrappy. We're good at taking advantage of free resources, like creating something out of nothing, right? So utilize those skills, find free resources if you can. If you're in a situation where you really have to consider your finances, like that's valid. And that was really important to me to do this as fiscally responsibly as possible. The second thing I would say is support. So I wanted to connect with other transitioning teachers. I joined the TPLD group, and just reading about people's experiences there was really helpful. I also leaned a lot on friends and family, let them know what I was going through. It's a huge time of change. So I wanted that support. I could not have gone through it alone. When I was going through this, like for a while, I actually went and lived on my friend's farm in rural Wisconsin just to like get away from all the noise for a little bit. Just threw my dog in the car and went to the middle of nowhere for a summer to be like, I need to figure my life out. So a lot of this was happening in rural Wisconsin. Also, consider getting a therapist. Teaching is such a big part of who we are that when we choose to leave, it can be really scary and confusing and destabilizing. And so there's no shame in finding professional support, like an objective professional opinion who can help you navigate that. These services are out there and you should take advantage of them. Connecting back to looking at your benefits, something I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, maybe see if part of your health insurance covers that. You might have mental health benefits. They might have some sort of employee assistance program. So just know that resource is there and you're not alone. There's other teachers who you can vent to. I do coffee chats a couple times a week, and I've definitely been on chats with teachers where we like yell and cry and curse, and it's a really hard transition. It's a hard, big life change. So you don't have to go through it alone. Really think about your support network. All right. Yeah, someone just mentioned the grieving process. Yes, I would say grief pretty accurately describes, well, that was like one of the feelings, also rage, because I loved teaching, and the fact that I felt I had to leave, that was rage inducing. But yeah, lots of feelings, all the feelings. Yep. All right. So that's it for me. We're going to open up for questions now. But if y'all want to keep in touch, my LinkedIn, my McKenzie Day. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'll drop this slideshow into the chat, the link, so you can all have it.
Thanks, McKenzie. Hey, I want to ask you this question just because I saw it come by, and I think it's a good one from Michelle. Did you create a portfolio before you transition? And if so, did you just create your samples using your free month of Articulate? How did you manage that?
Yeah. So when I transitioned, the Articulate free trial, it was longer. I think this 30 days, that was only this year. When I did it, it was like 60 or 90 days. So it's really not like, it's not the same now. But yeah, I did create a portfolio. I started applying in January of 21 using my teacher portfolio. And that's where I didn't get any hits. It had like some of the history units I had written. It had, I was a head of department, so it had like all my process documents for a curriculum overhaul, and it just was not working. So it wasn't until the summer when I revamped everything. And I'll say my portfolio, if you were to look at it today, looks very different than it did like a year and a half ago. I'm changing it constantly. So the portfolio is like a living document that is reflecting my skills in real time. I'm constantly adding things, taking things down, retiring content. Yeah, so the portfolio it's, just keep working at it, chipping away, improving. You'll learn things with like every like cycle of job hunting and then make some changes, and that's fine.
Well, I don't recall. Did you share your portfolio by chance?
It is on the last slide, and I'm gonna let me drop that link in the chat right now.
Oh, awesome. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
No worries.
Here is oh, go ahead.
Oh, someone just asked like how many items were in your portfolio? Way too many. Like initially I had like 15 things, and then I just realized that's not the best use of anyone's time. It's better to have a couple high quality pieces that really reflect my skills, that include some context. It shows the analysis, the impact. So I've narrowed it down over time.
In your interviews, when it came time to discuss your portfolio, what was that like? What was that part of the interview like?
Interestingly enough, the first time around, no one asked me about my portfolio. It wasn't until I was interviewing for senior ID roles that a couple times I had to do panel interviews where I talked through my portfolio pieces. And that for me was pretty easy. I show up to every interview or presentation with handwritten notes. So I, for each portfolio piece, had like a little outline of the important things I wanted to cover. And it kind of went through the Addy steps of like, here was the analysis I did all the way through to their speculative projects. I don't have any of my actual work like for my day job on my portfolio, but I included here's what I would do for evaluation. Here's how I would measure success if this were a real project. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay, cool. All right. How about this question from Jordan? Have you used any free or low cost ID technology platforms? If so, which do you recommend?
We did answer that, and I forgot to clear it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Let me do that. All right, let's go. And this one is just a comment from Kyle. If you're a part of the ELearning Heroes group on the Articulate community, they have lots of free templates. I would also recommend 7-Taps, perhaps even. And if you're looking to cut out the narrations, Well Said is really cost effective and timely. So I've never heard of Well Said. So I'll have to.
The ELearning Heroes, can't recommend that enough. When I was trying to take advantage of free resources, I mean, product documentation, like going to the source. So I went to the Articulate website. They run ELearning Heroes. That's really helpful. And for free, you can download people's source files and then break them down. So I had for every week, the ELearning Heroes challenge, I would download some of my favorite pieces and pick them apart and then try to rebuild them. It's totally free. And that's where I got most of my skills from.
Nice. And I know that a couple of, there is a TLD, well, someone who has spoken in TLDC before, who does pretty much all of the ELearning Heroes challenges. His name's John Hinchcliffe. Like if you follow folks like him, Jonathan Rock, I know participates in that a lot. Like if you follow them on LinkedIn, they're actually good resources for learning too. You can get a lot from them in social networks.
Yeah.
All right.
I see there's some questions about ELearning Heroes challenges. I do think they can go in your portfolio. However, individual interactions, like if you have a tab interaction, if you have a drag and drop, I'd say there's a time and place for those, especially if you want to go into e-learning development. But for instructional design too, you do want to be able to explain a bigger story with your portfolio pieces. So if you have something that's an ELearning Heroes challenge, like really think about, well, what problem is this solving? How is this a learning solution? Think about the context, because you'll want to be able to describe your thought process as well as show off your tech skills.
That is great advice. Just being able to explain that bigger story. I totally agree there. That's great. All right, let's see. This one from Karen. When there are so many platforms and softwares out there, and if you don't have the most popular specific experience yet, how do you promote yourself if you have other LMS or e-learning experiences while you're upskilling?
I had a lot of interviews with companies that just asked, what's your experience with authoring tools? And so that way you can talk about, this is really similar to this one. A lot of these tools we can figure out pretty quickly. If you know like one video editing software platform, the rest, like I knew iMovie, so Camtasia was super easy. Within like a day, I had the basics figured out.
Mhm.
And same thing with other authoring tools. So I'd say if you have the wrong authoring tools, just really emphasize the final product that you're creating, your technical skills. Think about like broader skills like video production, audio recording, maybe digital illustration, or the things that go in like programming. So a lot of these things are transferable, but I would say just be honest. You don't want to lie and say, like, I'm an articulate expert and then land a job and crash and burn in the first week. So just be really honest because a lot of companies are willing to upskill on a particular platform. My first instructional design job, they use Captivate, which, like, I did not know Captivate. I was honest, like, look, I've used Articulate Storyline. I've never touched Captivate. At that point, I didn't want to touch it with like a 10-foot pole. I was very intimidated. And then they gave me time to upskill. I figured it out. And within a couple months, I was building software simulations on Captivate. So I think a lot of hiring managers understand that you might not be familiar with every piece of software that's out there, but just emphasize that you're willing to learn and that you enjoy learning and upskilling.
McKenzie, would you consider yourself particularly like technical?
It's funny. I never did in the past, but now I am a technical instructional designer, so I'm getting there. I think like a lot of it's just mindset. I'm willing to Google everything. I taught myself a programming language last week so I could program a spreadsheet to tell me the mathematical best fit of a city I should move to this summer. So
Wow.
just by Googling things, I just figured it out. And now,
Mhm.
by the way, it says I should move back to Atlanta. So I'm trying. Um, but yeah, I think most things you can just Google and figure out. It's more about mindset, I think, if you're tech
Wow.
savvy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. One more from Karen. There are so many options for training and certificate or graduate programs. How to filter and select one? How valid are they to prove your experience versus using free resources online?
Uh, so I just got to sit in on a panel. We were hiring an instructional designer recently. And so I've seen the interview process kind of behind the scenes. And I can say education did not matter as much as skills. What can you do? At least the organization I was at there was not as much of an emphasis on how did you get those skills. For me, I already have a master's degree in education. So I was never going to go back and get another graduate degree or even a certificate program, like a bigger one. Like I said, I just didn't want to pay for them. I was like, I know that I have these skills. I just have to figure out how to translate them. So I'd say your skills are more important as far as filtering and selecting a program. Um, I mean, do your research, see if you can talk to graduates. I know Kara North has lots of content on how to do this. So if you want to check out her YouTube channel, I think she has entire videos dedicated to this, like choosing the right program. But I'd say overall, the skills are more important than how you got the skills.
It's true. I mean, I have met people, like I know of several programs that seem to be popular that a lot of folks have, gotten certifications from. But I think it really is kind of everybody has their own individual journey with that. I would be afraid to mention who they are, just because I wouldn't want to influence too much. But one thing you can also do is on the TLDC website. I have like a bunch of interviews. Like I think there's over 100 with different TLDC members, and they often will go through and mention what their background is, like where they have gotten their education from, and just their journey altogether. And that can actually be a really, really helpful resource for folks. And I do want to mention this one thing. Kayleen had a really great comment here. Where Kayleen said, I'd much rather hire someone who has the learning theory expertise and train them to use the tools I need than get someone who's great at tools and doesn't know how to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something in the chat that I think is worth highlighting. All right, let's see what other questions do we have on here. Okay, this is a good one. This one's from Stacy. In your current role, what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah. So I'm a remote worker at a tech company, so my schedule is pretty flexible. It's up to me, really, to shape my day. I'd say I tend to be more energetic in the morning. Like, that's when I get into my flow state. So for me, I set aside my development work in the morning. I get right in. Right now, I'm scripting a course, and then I'm developing some software simulations for another course. So I try to set aside like a couple hours uninterrupted to just keep my head down and get on with it independently. And then starting around lunchtime is when I will maybe reach out to people if I need to. I often try to schedule any sort of conversations in the afternoon. And that's just me, but the afternoon I might be meeting with like a product owner just to check in, show them a prototype of what I'm working on. Is this accurate? Do you have any feedback? Maybe I'm meeting with my ID team to talk about team stuff. But I'd say, yeah, it's a combination, my day to day, of like people management. I am a product owner or training product owner. So for one product that my company creates, I own all of the training solutions for that product. So it's a lot of people management, talking with the software developers, the product owners, our trainers, um, scheduling training, documenting all of our training source files and materials. And then the other side is the technical stuff. So developing on-demand courses, VILT, working in training environments. So it's a little bit of both.
Oh, that's great. McKenzie, you seem to be really technical. Was that something, even when you were teaching history, that you knew you had an affinity for, and some type of, it just sounds like you do a lot of stuff that I would say is definitely more on the dev side. So, did you realize that you had that type of a skill set, or that you were ever going to get into that?
I really didn't. Like, I was a history teacher, so I loved the social sciences. And I guess I always thought I was like somewhat of a tech savvy teacher, like adopting Edpuzzle before anyone else, or
Mhm.
I attended a lot of like ed tech conferences and things just because I was personally interested. I guess looking back, like I programmed a glittery live journal page when I was 12 years old. So it must have been there. But no,
Okay.
I never really thought of myself as like a tech person. But now I am a technical instructional designer. So it's a big part of my work now.
Nice, nice. All right, I have one more in the QA section from Carrie. Much like student teaching, are there opportunities to work with a mentor?
Um, Carrie, if you're still here, is that referring like you would like a mentor or like you want to be mentored? Um, If that's the case, there's a website called The Pivoter by Ann Lopez that has loads of people offering their time for free. I know I'm also one of many people on LinkedIn who offer time for like free coffee chats, check-ins. Um, I wouldn't say I'm like mentoring per se because most of the people I talk to like once for a Q&A session, but I do have like an ongoing relationship with some people that I've chatted with. So yeah, I check out the Pivoter
Nice.
if that's what you mean.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not seeing any responses in there. Let's see. Let me look back. All right. Yeah, and I know even just for myself with TLDC, I tried to start a mentorship program, and it actually is pretty hard. It's nice to hear that TPLD has something active, but it's not that difficult. I want to take a look at that, the Pivoter as well, just to see how that works. Let's see. And I did see something in the chat area that was okay. Stephanie is asking, do corporate ID jobs tend to work within a team, or is most of it all on the ID and a SMA?
Yeah, so that's a very valid worry. I also was afraid like I was just going to be all alone. And I mean a couple things. First of all, you are going to get the time and support. It's not like teaching where you have 1 week before students arrive to set up your classroom and lesson plan and get ready for the year. And then the kids are there a week later and it's go time. I mean, onboarding in the corporate world, it's very gradual. It might be months before you're even contributing anything. They give you time to upskill, orient yourself, familiarize yourself with the business, take meet and greets, meet the team. So you will be given the time. Both organizations I've worked with have immediately paired me with a buddy. And so I would keep like Post-it notes covered in questions and just constantly asking questions. And yeah, you are a part of a team that has established processes. So, you don't have to just figure it out. They're going to have job aids for here's how we build e-learning. Here's our settings, even in Storyline. This is how we publish and implement e-learning. Here's our template for VILT or whatever. They're going to have everything in place for you. I will say maybe that's not the case at like a startup, or if you're an L&D team of one, it might be a very different story. But I've worked in organizations where my teams are anywhere from like 6 to 80 people. So no, you're not alone, and it's okay to ask loads of questions. And also things are just more slow moving. Like teaching, you might lesson plan and then deliver the lesson tomorrow. Whereas developing learning solutions in a corporate workplace, it's a much slower process that has rounds of review and feedback. And if you build something and it's messed up, it's not going to go live. That they're going to check you beforehand, and you'll have time to revise and polish it.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, I think that's it. I want to make sure if use the virtual tables that are hosted this week out there in the lounge area if you have more questions. And also, TLDC does have a Slack group. You can go to tldchat.us, I think it is. If you go there, you can join our Slack group and feel free to ask any questions there. Also, I'm sure TPLD in your community, McKenzie, there's probably something there where you can go to talk. And I think just as generally the culture of educators is just focused on sharing knowledge anyway. So there's always going to be someone that is going to be willing to help. McKenzie, thank you so much for this. This has been great. Today altogether has been absolutely amazing. And it was great to finish the day with you. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll be in the lounge if anyone else wants to chat.
All right. And then don't forget, everybody, tomorrow we start again at the same time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. We've got Heidi Ranganathan talking about translating teacher to ID terminology. That is going to be a great one. I think that is definitely one you should check out. And then 2 more sessions after that. Sarah will be back. And then we've got Dr. Kuva Jacobs calling in from Australia. So tomorrow will be a good day as well. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and end the session. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.